On today's episode, I'll try to handle myself like an adult because we are joined by the one and only Jimmy Palmiotti. You may know him from such titles as Harley Quinn, Starfire, Power Girl, Painkiller Jane, and if I really wanted to list off everything, we would be here all night. Jimmy, how are you?
Good. How are you guys doing?
I'm pretty good. As good as I could be.
All right. Well, that's something to shoot for, I guess.
So thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
Means the world. 14-year-old Dan is freaking out.
Well, Dan, that's very sweet of you, Dan. But yeah. Calm down. It's okay.
Yeah, I gotta pump the brakes. Gotta be an adult. So, Jake, you want to hit him with that first hook?
All right. This might be a little tough.
Okay.
A little tough.
Okay.
What is your favorite sandwich and why?
Are we talking like personal space or food?
But both.
Okay, I guess I'll start with food wise. So I'm not one of those guys that loves a sandwich with 85 things on it. That's like a Dagwood, right? Like, a sandwich that has to be, I'm pretty much plain, like turkey and cheese, but they'd have to be like really good turkey and really good cheese. And I like things on like French bread. So I'm kind of a little European that way. Or a meatball Parmesan hero is always good if it's a good one. If the meatballs are good, then a meatball parm is that. As far as the other kind of sandwich, I guess my wife and Keira Knightley would be a kind of a fun sandwich to be in.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty big goal to shoot for.
Sure, why not?
And you say hero.
Yeah.
Are you from New York?
Yeah, I am. So hoagie, I guess, would be the other word, or
yeah. I think that's what they call it in my parts.
And where are you?
I'm in Philly.
Oh, you're in Philly. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. It's also a Jersey Shore.
Yeah.
I used to go down there and I had hoagies, and I was like, I know Hogan's Heroes, but I didn't know what a hoagie was right away. So I'm dating myself, by the way.
It's fine. And we're also both from Jersey as well. So
yeah,
very cool.
So, my second question is, what is your DC origin story? Where did your love for these characters start? And who is your quote-unquote character? Like the person you always will come home to?
So, that's a lot of questions. I guess we'll start with the character first. So, I mean, for years, growing up, I loved Superman. And then as I got a little older, I started buying like the science fiction and the horror and the westerns, and I fell in love with Jonah Hex. And then as I started working in comics, I must have pitched Jonah Hex like 15 times to DC, and I finally got it. So Jonah was one of them. But I do have a love for Harley Quinn and all the characters related to Power Girl. So there's Atlee and Power Girl and even Starfire. Like Amanda and I, my wife and I, have like this love for that group of characters. Like if DC really just wanted to give us the perfect book to do, they would, just give us like Power Girl, Harley, maybe Atlee and Starfire, and let us do a book where they're all, I don't know, they all live in Key West and have a good time. It would that would be like those are the characters I always like. I kind of always been drawn to the female characters, I think, because I thought when I grew up that they were very underwritten. They were either how they looked or they acted exactly like guys, but in women, there was some weirdness when I grew up. I always thought the female characters could be written better. And so that's probably why I like that. But as far as my origin story, you mean my DC, like how I got to work at DC?
Or how you got into comics in general.
Oh, okay. Well, I have two older brothers, so there was always comic books around. And I had an uncle that owned a barbershop in Brooklyn, and he had comics and Playboy magazines. And although I didn't become a supermodel, but I did enjoy the cartoons and everything about Playboy. Let's be honest. And then so I always had comics around, and it's not like today where you have computers, where you have TVs with a million things to watch. When I grew up, it was one TV in the house that we had to share, and it didn't have great stuff on it. Saturday was cartoons, and everything else was maybe like in New York, they had this thing 4:30 movie every day. So I'd come home from school and watch that, but there wasn't a lot of entertainment. And you had to keep busy yourself. So I loved music and I loved reading comics. And so I would buy anything. And there was a Salvation Army near my house. And the guy would put the comics in these boxes and then he would charge me by the pound. But I couldn't go through the box. So he'd have a box of like 300 comics for like $1 or $2, And I couldn't pick through them, but he would keep them in nice shape for me. He knew he was putting them aside for me because people kept bringing in comic books to the Salvation Army. This is before like comic shops were a big thing and all that kind of stuff. So I used to get comics from the 60s and the 70s, basically, and they were everything and anything. Everything from Magnus Robot Fighter to Jonah Hex to Marvel Comics. So I read everything, Eries and Creepies, and pretty much I consumed everything. And I did find myself, I think in the early 70s, leaning towards like Conan and Killraven and Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. And I realized that the superpower characters were less interesting for me as I got a little older. And it was the ones that were just regular people dealing with stuff that I found more interesting. Even Spider-Man, in a sense, when Peter Parker was always more interesting. Him and his girlfriends and his family and all that kind of stuff were always more interesting to me because I knew Spider-Man would just shoot his webs and catch the guy and, so on and so forth. So I did like the soap opera aspect of it, but I grew up loving the genre comics as well.
Fantastic answer. Wow.
Well, there were a lot of I guess we'll go on to the next one. There were lots of people asking us to ask about your Jonah Hex work, but we were more interested in asking about if it's more fun to write a time period piece or a modern day story.
Well, so modern day stories are easier because the research is the world we live in and it's right outside my door. So that's easy. When Justin Gray and I wrote Jonah Hex, we researched the hell out of everything. So since the character stories took place right after the Civil War, we would research everything from the kind of barbed wire they would use to what a house would have in it and what would a home, what would be in a home and what would be just everything. We had an issue where Jonah went into New York, so we did a lot of research of New York City in like I think it was like it was the early 1890s. It was a later story, and so we researched the map of the city and where buildings were and everything like that. We did a ton of research on Jonah because as we were researching, we would find out little details and little things, and this would give us story ideas. So when I say we could have written Jonah Hex for another 10 years, I'm not kidding. I mean, we wrote over 110 issues, I think, total, but we could actually write at least another 10 years worth of it based on all the research we did. So if you like that kind of thing, which I love research, then it's a lot more fun to write a time period piece. I took it to an extreme. I mean, I went and took horseback riding lessons, and then I spent some time at a ranch. Again, just to give the character, I'm a guy from Brooklyn who's never really had any of that in his life. The West was always some fantasy place for me. And I guess the flattering part is when we were doing Jonah Hex, we had all these Western magazines covering it and saying how authentic it was and all that kind of stuff. And that's like the ultimate flattery when you're writing to an audience that knows everything and is still happy with it. So if you like research, then I'm guessing time period is for you. I did some World War II comics. I did a book called Time Bomb, and I've done a lot of history stuff. I'm not afraid of it because I think there's just so much out there to learn from. And again, I always walk away with another 20 or 30 stories when I'm doing research.
So I was going to follow up with asking how you did the research, but I think the horseback riding may have just answered that.
Well, you also so like for Jonah Hex, we wanted to get the language right, and there was a couple of books that printed out the letters that soldiers wrote to their families when they were at war. And in these letters, if you read them, it's a pretty extensive collection. You get the actual slang and actual how people spoke around then, because letters would be the average person, right, writing a letter to their family. And as eloquent or as rough it may be, applying that to the dialogue really, really helped the book sell the feeling of the book.
So what is it like working with your wife as a co-writer compared to someone like Justin Gray or Ennis? How do those dynamics shift?
We can work in bed, Amanda and I. No, I'm kidding. That's just actually Garth and I used to. No, I'm kidding. All right. So I guess, with Justin, with every person you work with, they have a different background than you. So each person brings in a wealth of information and ideas. So it's why I like to collaborate a lot. But working with Amanda, is a lot easier than everyone because she's right here. And we kind of work, it's not like we sit at a table and work, although that happens sometimes. Most of the time we'll be driving or we'll be on a vacation and she'll go, hey, it'd be a cool idea. What if we did blah, blah, blah? And I'd be like, oh, what if we took it there? And then we jot it down on, so we were working when we weren't working. And I think that stimulates your brain. We definitely travel a lot. So every trip we take, we kind of navigate our way through new places. And this always inspires us. And again, we're very social people. So we'll go someplace we've never been and not only talk to people, but hang out and, make friends. And if you want to write for a living, you have to be a little bit social. You can't hide in your house all the time. So with Amanda, it's kind of easy. With Justin, we know each other so well, so we kind of know what we're going to do. And then, I have a screenwriting partner, and he definitely has a lot more experience than I do. So I kind of learned from him. It's sort of like if you're going to play a sport, like let's say tennis, you always want to play with somebody better than you so you can learn. And that's the way I feel about my writing partners.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of the work as co-written, which is, I think, as you've described it, is cool to see the collaboration of ideas and people bring different viewpoints.
Yeah.
So you're a huge advocate and pioneer for creator-owned comics. How much of a difference in freedom and ownership does that allow? Is it harder to do?
Well, so you can do creator shared, which is you can do with DC or Boom or IDW. Not Marvel so much. I think they pretty much own everything you do. They might have some little program here and there, but so creator shared means that basically when you work for these companies, you're creating something, but they're going to go out and sell it. They're going to also try to shop it, the intellectual property, to other places. And that's okay, but the problem there is you have no control. So it's sort of like you create this little baby and then you give it to someone and they run with it. And hopefully you hope they circle back and give you credit or make you part of the sale or share in the profit with you. And a lot of times, you have to kind of remind them about that. And I've had good partnerships and bad partnerships, but I don't really do too much creator-owned work for other people anymore because they don't have the drive that I do. It's great that they have the money and they can allow me some space to create something and work it into their world. But at the same time, I look at a lot of the things I've created over the years and I'm like, God, if I own that, I would be getting money. Or, hey, look, if I owned any part of, we rebooted Harley Quinn, it became a monster. And, although I benefit a tiny bit, Amanda and I, we really, comparison, we don't really make much money. We get to see it be the number one Halloween costume in the United States, yet, you kind of like, all right, yeah, it doesn't have the same thing. So I'd rather put out my own stuff. And with my website, Paper Films, we do Kickstarters. I do Kickstarters and I launch and create my own stuff. It's harder because I have to do everything. I have to be editor. I have to be the bank. I have to work with the printer. And I have to be the editor, and I have to, it's a lot of work, but I love doing it. And, nothing can replace my creator-owned stuff, and I own it, or I co-own it with my partners. And we can control whatever happens to it, and things like Painkiller Jane and, Monolith and Denver and all these properties that the Pro have lives. I mean, we've sold some properties 5 or 6 times already for development deals. And even though they weren't made, we still pull a check from it. And what I do is I have an account that pretty much whenever we make any money on that stuff, I put it in a separate account, and that goes to creating new books. So that's how I do the Kickstarters and stuff like that. I have a separate account, and it's like a creator-owned account for me. I'm the only nut that does that, but it helps me keep focused on what I'm doing.
So I've seen you tweet a lot recently about how your office is in a comic book shop and how you're seeing like the trends and things that are going on in the industry. Mm-hmm. What trends do you think you've been seeing in the recent past? And is there anything you'd like to see changed or even brought back?
Well, right now there's event fatigue, right? Mm-hmm. So Marvel and DC does these giant crossovers and expect you to buy all the books. And I'm seeing that people aren't buying all the books, and they aren't such a big deal anymore. And the numbers aren't as crazy as that. Once in a while they'll introduce something that's obvious. They'll like Marvel had Marvel Zombies, and then DC decided to do their zombie thing, and that's like a guarantee sale, right? Everybody wants to see that kind of fantasy what if kind of stuff happening with the characters. But I see that there's the books change teams a lot. And I think you lose readers. And the books, we stayed on Harley for almost 5 years, and we were able to build an audience on that book. But not everybody wants to stay on a book, or they want to move on to something else, or the people in charge want to move them off, or the artists can't keep up with the schedule. And I see it's hurting sales, and I see less and less. I'm in the comic shop, and there's a million new companies. But a lot of these new companies, it looks like they're just trying to create intellectual properties to sell as films. So the comics suck. They're just terrible reads because it's some screenwriter who's looking for a gig to get the comic made so they can sell it. And comic fans can smell that a mile away. And they don't support it and they don't buy it. And then you have companies, that are putting out one book after the other, 2-issue, 3-issue miniseries. All they want to do is get an IP out there and sell it. They're not worrying about the actual comic book themselves. And you read these things and they're just not great. And there's a lot of speculation. And, let's be honest, nobody needs 11 different covers for a comic. And the plot with that is, so I have my book and it has 11 covers. That means 10 other comics are not sold that week off the rack. And it's usually the smaller publishers that suffer for that, So there's a lot of these things going on. And, the store I work in has tons and tons of alternate covers. They just don't order them anymore. They unless you put them, you say in your box, I want them, they don't bother with them. If they don't pre-sell a 1 in 100 cover, they don't order 100. They just don't bother. So I'm seeing that the stores are finally getting smart because every book, obviously, they're not returnable. So they have to pay for every book. So they're just ordering less and less. And the companies, I'm watching the companies be a little more, worried about things because, let's be honest, there's a certain amount of creators that brand their work. We look at Mark Millar, we look at, there's a whole bunch of creators. Frank Miller, these are brand names, right? So we don't even care if it says Frank Miller's blah, 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 or Mike Mignola's blah, blah, blah. We're not even caring about what company's putting it out, because we're fans of the creators. So I think because creators are branding themselves more and working social media, of course, I'm one of them. Garth Ennis. It's like I buy Garth books. I don't care who's publishing them. I'll buy them.
Yeah.
So when they see that happening, is a little panic sets in. So companies are starting to push back, and companies like a Marvel and a DC will focus more on the characters and less on the creators, which makes sense for them, right? Because you're going to buy Spider-Man, you're going to buy Batman. No matter who's doing it, you're going to buy Batman. Okay? People who love Batman are going to buy Batman. It doesn't matter who's writing it, but it does if it's good or not, obviously. But at the end of the day, they're still going to order Batman or the Hulk or Spider-Man on some level. So what we see is a lot of creators branding and trying to branch out. And it's an interesting time because the racks are overcrowded right now.
Mm-hmm.
And people can't afford. You can't afford. You go to a comic store, it's $60, $80. I have my pull boxes. I have every number one that comes out. Well, my pull box is the size of a white box by the end of the month, by one of the storage boxes. And, it's ridiculous. And I don't know. I see all these trends, so I think the alternate covers thing needs to change. I think larger size comics need to come back, treasury editions. We need to have more fun with comics. And the dark comics and the superhero comics and all that stuff, I think they're overdone. I think we need some more fun. I think we need giant comics. I think we need different sizes and not to worry about if it's going to fit in a storage bag or a CGC plastic. I think we need to just have fun with the medium. I think the medium now is stalled and it's only doing one or two things right now. And I mean, there are new publishers experimenting with formats. My brain is
TKO.
Yeah, TKO is one of them.
We had their co-founder on last night.
Oh, okay, yeah. So yeah. I bought their whole line of books at a con because, I didn't see them in my regular store, and then he told me, "Oh no, we have them there. You just have to look for them." And the new book rack is around 700 books, so it's hard. Yeah. It's easy to miss something. But I love what TKO is doing. I would love to know more about them, so I'll listen to your interview you did last night when it's up, because I'd like to know if they're doing well or not. But my store said they had the 4 books, and I said, how did they do? And he says, the one with Garth did the best. And I said, yeah. And he goes, yeah, comic people, if they don't see a name they don't know, they don't really run to it. He says they're looking for names. They're looking for writers or artists that they know. So that was the observation. So you can tell your guy at TKO that that was an observation they made there. So
yeah, I did the same thing. I bought Sarah as soon as I saw it. I kind of want to piggyback off that a little bit. And I know you've done some work with the Walmart books, the giant size ones.
Yes.
Do you like that trend?
I like anything that's going to get comics to people that don't normally get comics. So I love that they're doing that. They're kind of like, I call them no ego comics because we kind of write them and we don't get feedback on them. We don't know if people are reading them. Well, we know they're reading them, they're buying them. But they're not in the, nobody considers them. Comic people look at them like, oh, that's a thing you buy in another store. So Amanda and I love doing it. We've been working on Wonder Woman. We did a 12-part Wonder Woman that had Jonah Hex in it. But then, now they're collecting them 2 parts at a time in June. So Wonder Woman Come Back to Me starts in June. It's the series Amanda and I did with Chad Harden. And so I love it because anything that gets comics where you can't normally get them is great. Okay. Yeah. I want to see comics everywhere. I'd love to see them back in candy stores and, like 7-Eleven racks and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but I thought the Walmart thing was a really good start.
Yeah. I think Jake and I's goal for this show is to try to get comics into the hands of the people who don't normally pick up those comics. So stuff like that is super exciting to see, like kids in a Walmart or like they have one at Target, seeing them hold these books and buy them. It's just super exciting for me because they'll be readers for life.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, it's, Free Comic Book Day is supposed to do that, but how does it serve its purpose when you're only giving them away in comic shops? Yeah, I think Free Comic Book Day should be like they drop off 10,000 comics at toll booths So when you pay your toll going on a bridge, they hand you a comic on Free Comic Book Day. You know, I'd love to see the free comic books in places that we never see comics. Leave them on subway trains in the cities or on buses, or, you know, give them out in restaurants. And, you know, I love Free Comic Book Day. Don't get me wrong. I love the idea of it. But I think that you have to go to a comic store to get them is just giving them to comic book people. I think what we need to do is give them out places nobody would expect. Motor vehicles, everybody in the motor vehicles that day gets a free comic while they're waiting for the thing. For me, that's how you open up the door for that. You know, or schools. Let's be honest, Free Comic Book Day, why isn't a giant box of them given to every grammar school in the United States? You know?
Yeah, that and like libraries sometimes do them too, but that's like two places where
right, people are already reading. They're already going. No, we need to go places that it's not.
Yeah.
So you have the young readers Free Comic Book Days. Those should be going to schools.
Absolutely.
Every school should get a couple of hundred of them. You know, I learned to read using comics. Nobody forced me to read a comic book. I picked it up and read it myself. And that's what you really want kids to get into reading. Because right now, they don't really read that much. I have neighbors that have kids and everything. They, you know, they'll start a book and they won't finish it because there's a video game or even worse, a YouTube video of somebody playing a video game that they'd rather sit and watch because it's easier. So my thing is we have to get them while they're young and get them in places where it's not normally thought of. So Free Comic Book Day, in theory, it's fun. The reality is it should be an actual Free Comic Book Day. It should be actually comics everywhere.
You know? How do you come at characters with a much bigger fan base than others?
You don't worry about it. That's the first part. You know, it's a gig for a writer, right? So so I guess Harley's a good example. People had expectations and everything. Any writer will tell you write the character so it entertains you, first and foremost. So I look at a character like Harley and I said, why would I care? Why would I care about this character? Why would I want to read this comic? You know, I had the same thing when I wrote Deadpool, you know, and even The Punisher. I'm like, all right, why do I care? What is it about this character that's cool? What have they done in the past that I like? What have they done that I hated? And then, you know, you smack all that together, create an amalgam of what you think it should be. Every comic fan has that. Oh, that's not the Spider-Man I like. The Spider-Man I like is this. And, you know, and you do that as a writer. You say, well, my favorite time for this character was, of Captain Marvel was when Jim Starlin did it. Well, all those cosmic issues, because I love the way this and that. So you wind up bringing that into your work. You know, and I see it all the time. Whenever you see a new writer on, you can tell exactly what he grew up on and what he likes to read because it's exactly what he's writing.
So this next question, someone asked it on Twitter, but it is the big one for me. Someone on Twitter asked about the new 52 Freedom Fighters, Human Bomb, Phantom Lady, the Ray, but that never seemed to come to a conclusion. Is there anything you can tell us about that?
Yeah, so Dan DiDio approached Justin Gray and I and said, here's a bunch of characters, Human Bomb, Phantom Lady, the Ray, Freedom Fighters, basically the Freedom Fighters. And they had to, so every certain amount of years, the trademark and copyright have to be reinstated. So they have to put out a new series. So we wrote a Freedom Fighters book. We wrote a Human Bomb. We did the Phantom Lady. We introduced a new Ray. We did everything DC wanted us to do, except they didn't really support it. So the books came out. Nobody bought them. Nobody knew they were coming out. I'm really proud of a couple of them. And but when you don't have the company support, well, then the books just come and go. And so they died, and they never even got reprinted. That's even how bad it was. So it was just I think it was just to keep the license alive. I think they wanted to see what we would do, and you know, some ideas we had. You know, we put everything we had into them, but again, if the company isn't going to make it interact with the rest of the DCU, then it's hard for anybody to get behind these books. That at least that's my theory on it. I just think that they weren't supported enough. So when they came out, they came and they went. And sometimes that happens. I have a career, if you look between the lines, of working on the weirdest, smallest characters in both companies that ever existed. And I never minded it because I think I've written Batman, I've written Superman, I've written Wonder Woman, I've written the top, I've done the top books at Marvel as well. That's great, but when you get the smaller characters, nobody cares what you're doing as much. So you can get really creative with them. And so that's always been a thing I've done. I say I spent maybe 10 years writing books that'll never make royalties. And it's consistently true. I don't get a dime on these things because they're never reprinted and people don't even buy them digitally. But I'm still proud of them, and I'm very proud of the work my teams did on it because they're great. I work with great talent on those books.
Yeah. So was it the fact that they were small characters that you drew to the Freedom Fighters, or did you have an affinity for them before that?
Well, Dollman was pretty small, but I like them because they were weird characters. They were just, there's a guy it's called the Human Bomb. I mean, what the hell? What's more fun than that? A character that can just explode. And the Ray was always a cool character, and they let us mess with that concept. And Uncle Sam, Uncle Sam is just like it's an odd thing. It's sort of like when Grant Morrison, in a way, like he picks the odd stuff too. It's because you can have more fun with it and there's less rules. Superman, Batman, there's so many rules. We can't have Alfred, turn into a bat and fly around. They'd be like, what the hell are you doing? But Freedom Fighters, we can do anything. So even though they didn't sell, they were still fun comics for us to do. And at the end of the day, that's all I want from my job.
Yeah. And they found an audience because I got here. So I personally thank you for those books because Freedom Fighters is some of my favorite DC work ever.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and we had fun. I mean, we were very loyal to the characters. What came before, and we were just trying to get new people to be excited about them. But it's hard, Again, it's easy to push the new Batman book by the new writer or the new Superman book by the new writer. It's easy to push that stuff. You guys know it as well as I do. You say, why do the studios, they're pushing Star Wars movies so hard when they got 30 films that are great, but nobody's going to see them? And they're like, because they want to go for the easy sale, the easy money,
It's about the money at the end of the day.
Yeah. It's all business.
It's a business. Yeah.
It's a business and it makes sense in the long run.
Yeah. And they are doing a mini series with the Freedom Fighters right now.
Yeah, I think it's Tom. Is Tom doing it? It's Tom Taylor.
No, I think I can't remember the writer, but it's been pretty solid. It's not like it's not an Elseworlds, but it's not in the main continuity, but it's great. It's just cool to see those characters brought back.
Yeah, they do. Every 5 years, you'll see them brought back. 5 to 6 years.
It's interesting to know that.
Yep. That's the business.
What is your favorite 3D medium to work with?
You mean like clay? What are you talking about?
like different materials like charcoal, watercolor. Like, what is your
medium? Obviously, I love pen and ink. I was an inker.
Yeah.
I was an inker for many years, and I love watercolors. I trained with Mario Cooper in New York, the Art Students League, to do watercolors. And those are the ones that I'm good at. The ones I'm horrible at are like everything else, but it doesn't mean I don't enjoy trying them. I like to do coloring as well. I started out doing coloring when some of my first work. Uncredited, thank God, so nobody can find it. But
you don't want to tell us what you did.
Nope. And anyway, I think the pen and ink is my favorite. I mean, everything's done on computer. I can use these programs now and do everything. but I still like paper to pencil and ink to paper. And I think because it's such a visceral experience, when I'm at a convention, I kind of sketch a little bit. And I think people really enjoy watching that. So I know I do, because I watch other artists draw and I'm always amazed. I watch Amanda draw and I just have to leave the room because I'm like, oh, she's so good. I can't take this anymore. I should never pick up a pencil again, you know? Yeah. It was tough between her, and I had Darwin Cook here all the time. And I was like, these guys are so amazing. Like, I don't even want to doodle on a napkin. You know what I mean? Because I'm going to feel like I'm a failure. So, yeah. You know.
You have some pretty high standards that were around you. So.
Unrealistic, to be honest.
Yeah.
These bastards, the two of them. Darwin's not with us, but I curse him out every day anyway. So he's still with me. You know what he did? I'll tell you. Like, okay, while he was with us, he managed to put a piece of art or something in every room of my house over the years. He bought me a table. He got us a chair, something in a frame. Even my bathroom had a piece of art with Jonah Hex and an outhouse that he did. So I realized after he died, like one day I just came to the realization, like, oh my God, he made sure there was something of his in every room in my house, like an ashtray. Even outside on my deck, there's an ashtray that's his. You know, yeah, he was sneaky that way. But I miss the guy. Great guy.
Yeah, he's very well missed.
Yeah,
look at some of his work, and I just want to turn down everything else. It's like, whew.
Well, I think DC Comics honestly should get New Frontier and make that like the book that they base all their other books on. You know, yeah. Oh. He did that series. I think he did like 35 or 40 covers, DC covers that month. And if the inside of the books looked like those covers, every book would be the best-selling comic in comics. You know, yeah.
That's actually one of the only one of the most recent comic books our sound guy has read, and he just was baffled by the beauty of the whole thing and how that style just captures the ideas of the DC universe so well.
Oh yeah, I mean, you know what it was? He celebrated the joy of the characters. Not the dark side, not the mess ups. It's the joy of being Wonder Woman and the fun of being Batman and the coolness of being Superman. Like, he celebrated that in the book. He and I worked together a lot, and it's like whenever he touched it, it would become something bigger than it normally was, because he really had a childlike approach to the characters. He looked at them like the kind of gods we thought when we were kids, how cool and how big these characters were. It stayed with him as an adult, and it shows in the work. New Frontier is a celebration of that.
Yeah. We'll cover that one day, but it's like one of those books like I want to put off because I want to give it as much time as I possibly can.
Yeah, it's definitely, if you get thrown in prison, make sure you take it with you.
You know what? That's a new recommendation I can give to people.
There you go.
Have you ever hidden any subliminal messages in any of your work?
Sure, all the time. all the time. Are you kidding me? Harley Quinn. Okay, we had a main character that was a beaver. We had a rooster named Mike the cock. We had, oh my God. I mean, Joe and I, even back then, Joe Quesada and I hid the word sex in a Ninjak cover. And are you kidding me? There's so much stuff in the Harley Quinn issues. You get every issue we did, and every issue of it, there is something in there that's going to make you go, what? Or how did they get away with this? And yeah, so some of it wasn't so subliminal. Some of it was so in your face you didn't see it. And that's another kind of subliminal, but yeah, because we can't help doing that because we're giant children. Adults are just large children, you know that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So like we're idiots. Once in a while we get caught, and they'd wag a finger at us, and then we'd come out with Harley Quinn and Lobo, and then it'd be right back again, you know? I mean, Simon Bisley drew Harley Quinn naked in that book, and we had to put little red flags in front of her little naughty parts here and there. And they're like, "Are you guys kidding?" And Simon's like, "Well, just cover it up with a word balloon. That's all. Nobody will see it."
Yeah, it's fine. Just cover it up.
There was more nipples in that original art. Like, oh my God. And just so funny. Like, yeah, but it's like, you know, again, Harley was a good book for us to write because it was Amanda and I, like two teenagers having fun with those characters. So that's why the book came off as crazy as it did, because we were just having fun with it.
And it landed too. So that's all that merely matters.
Yeah. I mean, you know, look, it could have, when they gave it to us, nobody thought it would do well. So I have to say, they said it might last a year. And, so they said, so do whatever you want. And Amanda took it to the extreme. She said, let me just put a different costume on her every issue. Why not?
Yeah, that is my favorite thing, because now it's in the film too.
Yeah. Oh, the film has, yes. And I'm not allowed to talk about the film. But
you know some secrets.
But I know secrets, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Do. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be fun.
Well, now we know that you know secrets. So
I do. But now you know that I know that you know that I know secrets. Yes.
The ever-ending circle.
Yeah. Yep.
Next question. Okay. How long did it take to develop a signature, both artistically and literally?
Well, I just signed my name like I signed my name, so I don't have.
Yeah,
I'm not like Rob Liefeld, and I have like this, you know, really drawn out kind of thing. Or Joe has a circle with the Q, and mine is just my name. So, because I figured somewhere down the line I might have to sign this a lot. So let me just do what I have to do. That's the literal part. Artistically, you know, my writing style, that's a question for somebody else. Do I have a writing style? I don't know. I just know eventually in my books, there's going to be some humor, dark humor, and people will be naked at one point or another. It's because I think I grew up, you know, thinking those two things were just funny and fun, and they always make their way in the books. But
you read your Playboy and then you read your comic books. So
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, right next to each other.
It definitely influenced me, little Annie Fanny and all that kind of stuff. But I also have a very healthy, you know, because I have women in my life, obviously my wife and you know, I grew up with very strong women. So I have a very healthy outlook on just how powerful and strong women are, and a respect for that comes across hopefully in the writing. But as far as if I have a style or not, that's something you guys can answer, because I don't know if I do. I still, every time I'm writing something, I'm just trying to get through it and, you know, stop and then think about it. And how can I make this better? How can I make this line of dialogue more direct? How can I reduce it from 30 words to 6? You know what I mean? So you do that. And in the meantime, you start, other people notice it. But I don't think a writer themselves notice a style. I think there's a certain joy to my books. I don't like super, super dark. And if I do a dark book, it'll have some comedy in it. The character will inevitably realize how dark it is and make fun of it. You know, because that's, again, how I would deal with something. You get the most horrible news in the world. You can sit with it or you can process it. And when you process it, you start to you calm down and slow it down and look at it and, you know, look at what it really is. You just slow it down, right? And then, you know, it's sort of like the internet. Somebody says something, you don't type right away and send it. You kind of keep calm, slow it down, have integrity in what you're doing, and then you write. And eventually that'll be good for you, because I'm Italian, so I used to get angry like right away and say whatever was on my mind, and I had to stop that because that's a bad habit, you know. So slowing it down is a big part of, I think, my writing. Ta-da!
Yeah.
Ta-da! I don't know.
So
somebody else can argue that They can just, I think they can go, hey, actually, I know your stuff because it always sucks. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Well, there's other comics you can buy, Well,
first off, ouch. Second, that was really mean.
No, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Look, there's an ass for every seat. I mean, I if you don't like my stuff, you can go right down the rack and get somebody else's. It's okay. It's okay. I never get upset about that.
So before this interview, I actually had to add one question because I'm sitting on the couch trying to explain who I'm talking to my girlfriend. Okay. And she was like, oh, he and his wife wrote Starfire. Amanda's Starfire is on the shelf behind me. Our cat is named Corey. So she wanted to know how it was to write Starfire.
So we were fans of the original Starfire, obviously, when we were younger. And we loved the character. And when they handed it to us, they said, you guys want to do Starfire for a year, 12 issues. And we said, sure. Let's see what can we do and what can we not do and what are the rules. And the rules, he said, well, kind of just do whatever you guys do, what you and Amanda do on Starfire. Like, take it and make it yours. So part of that was us. We love, we love the Teen Titans cartoons, especially those crazy ones. What do they call? I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the show. The one,
Teen Titans Go.
Yeah, Teen Titans Go is amazing. Okay, and better written than most comic books, by the way. I just think they're hysterical. And if you're not so angry about that's not the real Robin, whatever. Once you get over all that, it's actually really hysterical cartoon.
If you haven't seen the movie, make sure you pick that up.
I haven't seen it yet, but I'm going to see it. So, but anyway, so we decided, and then we were reading about how some people had pushback because other writers made her very sexual, and Amanda pointed out, she said, well, originally she's a very hedonistic character, that she's very open about her sexuality and that she's very confident in who she is and what she is. So her sexuality is a part of her. And because she's an alien, she doesn't have the same hangups as we do. So when we approached Starfire, we said, okay, well, she's a hedonistic alien trying to live on Earth and trying to blend in. Let's make the series less about supervillains and more about her trying to get along around regular people. And we were thinking, well, where would we set the book? And we thought, well, Key West is a pretty hedonistic area of the United States. If you've ever been there, it's kind of like, it's a little open season for pretty much anything and a lot of fun people. And people were on, crazy behavior down there. And it was either that or New Orleans, by the way. And so we went for Key West. And then we said, okay, so what's the story we want to tell about Corey? What do we want to do? And we just said the key word is fun. People will be having their own opinions of her, and then she's going to throw them all off. And just fun. So we did 12 issues of girl bonding and crazy fun stuff and Robin, Nightwing, and all that kind of stuff. We just made it a fun comic. It sold okay, but we didn't realize when we left, the trades actually really sold well. And people were like, oh, I wish you guys were still on it. Like, while we were doing it, people enjoyed it. But when we left it, we had what we call our Power Girl syndrome, which was we did Power Girl for a year. And people bought it okay, but when the trades came out and years later, everyone started discovering those books like crazy. And its trades have been being printed constantly and they're constantly selling. So it's like one of those things where people discovered the books after we were done with them. And so Starfire, again, was just us having some fun. And as Dan DiDio said, just do your own thing on the book. Make it Jimmy and Amanda or Amanda and Jimmy. And that's what we did.
Great. That's super exciting, especially knowing that it may have been in New Orleans.
Yeah, we were, it was close. But New Orleans isn't really like beach weather, it's just humid. Yeah. It's humid and disgusting. And Amanda's family, dad's side of the family all come from New Orleans. So we were trying to write what we knew, and we've been to Key West so many times, and we've been to New Orleans so many times. And I think when you can write a character in a place that's real and it feels real, it adds another dimension to the book.
So I've heard that you have pretty good eyes for new talent. Is there someone working today that anytime you see their art or their writing, you just go, wow?
Yeah, more art for me, because writing is a commitment for me to read other people's stuff. So John Timms was a guy. He drew Harley for us, and he's doing a whole bunch of other books now. But John was a guy. Amanda and I did a signing in a tiny store in Costa Rica years ago, and this guy, this real energetic guy, tall, skinny guy, came over with his portfolio, and he says, "Can I show you my art?" And I'm like, "Sure." And I look at it, and he just blew me away. And I was like, "What do you do?" And he goes, "Oh, I do animation for TV here in Costa Rica, but I really want to draw comic books." And I told him, I said, "Give us 3 weeks, and I'll have work for you." And he's been working ever since. DC has him under exclusive, and we loved him on Harley Quinn. And like I said, he's doing other books now, but he was one of those guys that has an energy to his work, and he knows how to tell a story. The problem with a lot of comic artists is it looks good, but I don't know what the hell's going on the page. Like, there's no backgrounds, there's no interaction with the characters. It's just heads. And, John actually took the time to, when we did Harley, he actually flew to Coney Island and took like 1,000 photos, like he went and researched it, and he made this part of what he wanted to do. And, so he's one of the guys I can honestly say that he just keeps getting better. And I'm jealous when he gets to work with other writers, because I want to end that relationship and get him back. But I also want John to do very well. So I have to put those feelings aside, and I root for him on everything he does.
That made me smile so wide, just like, wow. So our last question for the past couple of interviews we've done has been about, if there's ever anything no one asked you about on interviews, and you were the first one who read it before we got the chat. And you said no one ever asks about your screenwriting, game writing, and develop of intellectual properties. So I did a little research, and it looked like you worked on DC versus Mortal Kombat.
Yes, I did. Justin and I did, yeah.
What was it like writing a game based on two behemoths?
We were originally, what happened was, I think the game was at a standstill between the guys in Chicago that were doing the Mortal Kombat side and then the Warner Brothers side. And they asked us to go up and consult and sort of kickstart the project. And then we wound up co-writing it with them. So it was a lot of fun. But I did write a couple of games before that. The first game I wrote was The Punisher with Garth Ennis. When Garth and I were working on The Punisher with Steve, welcome back Frank from Marvel Knights, they wanted to do a game, and we wrote that. And then we co-wrote, Justin and I wrote I think it was Garth and I, that's right. We did the Ghost Rider game as well after that. So it's like, there was a lot of stuff before that. And then, after Mortal Kombat versus DCU, then we did Injustice. And then Dead Space was the animated movie. I wrote that. Justin and I wrote that for the game. EA Games hired us to write the animated movie with Stars Company, do it with Stars. And so we did a lot of that stuff. The games are not about one person. It's about 300 people. It's sort of like a movie. People always go, "Oh, it was directed by this guy." And I'm like, yeah, okay, there's 10,000 credits after his, it's not one guy.
Yeah.
It's never one person. So games are all about big groups of people, technicians and all that kind of stuff. So it's overpowering. I've done less and less games over the years because, they started taking away the royalty part of the payments. And I don't like that because I did very well with The Punisher and the other games, and then we don't do royalties anymore, which basically means, we're just going to have the guys that work here write it, even though they're not writers. And, so I think games have changed over the years a little bit, I think Frank Thierry is still one of the few guys that writes the video games. But that was the start for me from doing, I had a Painkiller Jane TV show on Sci-Fi for 22 one-hour episodes, and I wrote one episode called The League, and I I was like a story consultant, and I worked in the writer's room, and it's always been something I do on the side. You know, most recently, I wrote a book called Random Acts of Violence that Jay Baruchel bought, the actor, and he wrote and directed the movie, which comes out probably in fall, based on the book. And then I have, you know, I worked on Painkiller Jane, I got screenplay, and Back to Brooklyn. Me and Craig Whedon did an adaptation of the Back to Brooklyn book that Garth Ennis and I wrote. And my screenwriting's been a constant thing, but it's probably the hardest job in the world because people look at you and say, "Oh, you do comics, you don't do that."
Yeah.
I had that when I was an inker, you know, because I wanted to write, I wanted the pencil, and they're like, "Well, you're an inker, so you should be doing that and not that." And for me, I've always been the personality. When you tell me I can't do something, I want to do it 10 times more, and show you. I can show you I can do it. So the screenwriting's been a constant thing for me. Now I'm working on a screenplay right now, just for myself, because it's tough to do. It's tough to get writing unless I want to be on a TV show. I don't want to work on TV shows that much because then I have to move and live with the show for a year or two. And unless I've created the show, I've been offered work to write an episode of something here and there, and that's easy. But if it's something you create, then you have to commit, you know. But it's just something, like I said, I don't know if a lot of people know I do it. I mean, if you look at my IMDb, there's some credits there that kind of give you overall of what I've done. But it's something I constantly do. I have 2 screenplays right on my computer right now that I constantly go back in and retweak and change. That's the fun of editing, guys, right? You keep going back and saying, okay, there's a better way of saying that, or there's a funnier way of saying that. And but it's a job where it takes years and years and years. And then overnight, you're like the popular guy, and then the next week, you're nobody again. It's really fun. It's good for the soul.
So I guess it makes sense that you did the Punisher game, but I never connected those dots. Jake can attest that I spent a lot of time playing that as a kid.
That dialogue we wrote for that game, Garth and I were laughing out loud. We're writing it. Like we at one point, I don't know if you remember, Iron Man comes in and goes, mm-hmm. I need a drink. And then he just flies away. And nobody at the game company understood that line, you know? And it was so funny. And of course, you know, we were like, well, the piranhas have to bite the guy's face off a little more, you know? And we had all these crazy details like, when he walks in there, he has to shotgun that guy's head off. It can't just be hanging there, you know, like all that crazy stuff that we did. And the game guys did everything we told them to do. It was in that game. I mean, that game is crazy.
Yeah.
If it was a modern day game, it's such a mature game, you know?
Oh yeah. It was a hard M.
Yes.
And you got Tony Stark line, man.
Yeah. And you got to remember that game was made only because the Marvel Knights series of Punisher was selling that well. Like when Joe and I did Marvel Knights, all of a sudden people got interested in Daredevil and Punisher, you know, Inhumans, and you know, and all these characters, and Black Panther. You know, all of a sudden Black Panther is a viable character. You know. And when we were doing it, so the games started happening, and you know all this other stuff started happening. It was an exciting time, and I think it was whatever year anniversary. We just had the anniversary. I don't know if it's 20 years ago or something like that. But we were laughing because somebody pointed out to me like how it changed. Marvel Knights changed so much stuff, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's good. Yeah.
All right, no big deal. Just wrote one of the biggest series of all time.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for them to thank me in those pile of credits at the end of something, you know. I
sit in those theaters not for like the after credits, just to see like the writers' names. Like if I see a Kirby up there, I'm always gonna get a little giddy.
Yeah. No, I would have loved to see my name in the Black Panther movie. or on the Punisher TV show, or on a Daredevil movie. Just a thank you. A thank you would have been nice, especially when they used the Marvel Knights logo. But it's never happened. So I don't know. It's a weird thing.
I know you've got those secrets. You think you're going to get a thank you in Harley Quinn at least?
Yes.
All right. Well, there we go. Insider scoop.
Yeah. No, look, you hang around long enough, things happen for you.
Yeah.
Because they think, well, he's going to die soon, so let's throw his name on there.
He hasn't got much longer.
It's not that I'm that old, mind you, okay? I'm not that old. But there is a certain thing where people tend to mellow out a little bit and go, yeah, we should probably put that guy's name on there now. I'm like you. I watch the movie and I wait to see like Jim Starlin's name in when he was in that Avengers movie. Amanda and I were like cheering, when we saw him in that scene with this therapy scene, and we were like, oh, thank God. Like they're doing that kind of stuff now,
It's good to see these people getting I saw Claremont was at the Dark Phoenix premiere, and it made me smile. Like those people work so hard, and it's really cool to see more creators getting the credit they deserve.
Absolutely. I was laughing because I saw the article, and that same article, I guess, where it said Fox invited him to the premiere and everything. And I was like, was that like them being like, Fox invited him to the premiere? I was like, It's like, I don't know. Maybe I'm reading in between the lines too much, but no, it's great to see. I mean, let's be honest. Chris, they owe so much to Chris Claremont.
Yeah.
Come on, so much, and Priest and Tex for Black Panther, and everybody that came before. My attitude is, you put everyone's name that ever worked on those characters in the thank yous. What the hell? I mean, look how many digital artists. There's like 8,000 credits. What's another?
Lost anything?
Right. What's another 30 names? I'd love to see Gene Colan and everybody that ever worked on Daredevil, everybody that ever worked on the Avengers. Because it's exciting for us, even if it is 40 minutes into the credits and we have to look at amazing speeds because our eyes can't focus that quickly. It's still later on we could freeze frame it and enjoy it. It gives me a thrill to see the guys that I grew up with being credited.
So where can people find you, and is there any work they should look out for that you have coming?
Okay, so paperfilms.com is my website, and if you go on it, in the bottom of the first page, there's a newsletter, and once a month we put a thing in the email, and it's pretty much where Amanda and I are going to be, what we got coming out, some exclusive art, that kind of stuff. So we do that once a month. We load it up so you have something to do and say, oh, I never saw that, or some pencil drawing Amanda did that no one's ever seen, or some weird items we put in there, and coupons for the stuff on the site, because we sell our books and we sell our digital books. And the other places, I'm not on Facebook. I'm only on Twitter and Instagram. So it's my name on both Twitter and Instagram. And those are my two main things. Facebook, I have security issues and a lot of issues with, because, obviously over the years, we found out, that, information's been given out and everything. And I don't think that's going to get much better as it goes on. Yeah. So I think Twitter is fine. I think Instagram's great for us because it's visual stuff. And that's what we're about. Oh, and what's coming out in June, in June, it's Wonder Woman Come Back to Me. It's a 6-issue miniseries featuring Chad Hardin, Tom Derenak. Amanda did the covers, new covers on it. And it's Wonder Woman, Jonah Hex, Etta Candy, Steve Trevor, Bermuda Triangle, deep in outer space, aliens, giant space centers, giant space stations, fighting rings, like Roman fighting rings in space. And it's crazy because they gave us 6 issues of Amanda and I saying, all right, how crazy can we make Wonder Woman? How crazy can we make the story and not make it about the Amazons for a change? So we did a lot of time and space and all this crazy stuff in it. So if you like that kind of thing, it comes out in June.
I'm excited.
Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you for coming out.
Dan, Jake. We learned something today.
We did. I learned a lot.